So today is April 15th, tax day. And so many people are asking, should I pay taxes? Because do I want to support all the financial corruption, sexual corruption, spiritual corruption, and many, many other types of corruption that our tax dollars have been used to support? And Jesus was asked a similar question. He was asked by some Romans, hey, should we pay taxes? And he asked for them to bring a dollar, or not a dollar, but a coin. And they brought a coin and they said, whose picture is on that coin? And they said, Caesar's. And he said, give to Caesar's what is Caesar's, and give to the Lord what is the Lord's. And it seems like a strange way to answer that question, because what he was doing was actually changing the question. He's not answering the question on its own terms. Jesus is always changing the question, because he didn't come to give moral advice. He came to change the system that they were in. He was not coming to give a moral, but he was really speaking about energy. He was a carpenter, but he was in a sense an electrician. He came to fix our electrical problem, because he knew, like Tesla, that everything is energy. And it's just energy in different vibrations and frequencies. And then when we give our different creative forces into that field of luminiferous ether, it creates all varieties of different forms of matter. And it comes in this great cycle of different phenomena. So Tesla knew it, Jesus knew it, and he was here to fix the electrical problem. And so what I'm going to share is the electrical problem of Loosh harvesting. There's two types of energy, which is alpha and omega, or the intention and attention, or you could call it eros and agape. Carl Jung, or the Gnostic in the egg within the egg within the egg of this book of his, says that spiritual and sexual energy those are the two types of energy. Everything is either spiritual energy or sexual energy, and there are two sides of the same coin, and you can't have one without the other. Okay, so there are two types of energy, but there are also two types of energy systems, right? And he came to help us rewire our system, right? Because I'm going to show you how the Loosh harvesting system, many of us have heard about the Loosh harvesting that's being done by Draconians or Anunnaki, or the Illuminati or whomever, and we're like, oh, this is some evil plot against us, and in a way it is, but in a way it's an experiment, and it's an experiment, and we're in the Gnostics would say we're in a prison planet, being guarded, and like we're in this box, right? They use this time box technology to harvest our Loosh. But the question is, well, what other alternative is there? If we're stuck in this Loosh system, whether it's a prison planet or whether it's an escape room, or a school room, and we have to learn how to escape it so that we can reconnect to the divine, then the question is, how do we do that? But first, I want to show you the two different types of electrical systems that there are. And one of them, represented by the battery here, is the DC energy, the direct current. It's a closed system. It's not plugged in. It's not plugged into source. And this light here, which is plugged in, is representing that alternative current, that AC energy, right, that is connected to source, and it just stays on as long as it's plugged in, right? And so here's the secret. if you want to create a Loosh harvesting system yourself, let me tell you how to do it. Not so that you can go out and create them yourself, but so that you can know how to get out of one, or how to know if you're in one, and know how, therefore, to get out of one without going into the scary potential chaos of absolute disorder. Because what's offered us inside this box technology, it's sometimes called the Saturnian cube technology. These cubes, and we see these black cubes all over, like Mecca, and like the boxes that Jews wear on their arms and forehead. These cubes are everywhere, and this cube is a form of isolating a time matrix. It's creating sort of a phantom time matrix, a false matrix within the larger true matrix. And then once it's isolated, once you create this box, you can hook it up so that you're, in a sense, giving them energy. You offer them, you offer whatever creatures, humans, that are allowed into your time box or into your time matrix. You give them some energy, you give them protection, you give them safety, maybe food, water, connection, and you meet their basic needs. You promise this protection, kind of like a feudal king would offer this protection to the serfs, but there's some return. You have to pay taxes, right? And you have to give your homage to the king, right? Give back. And so whoever's at the top of that system, whoever created that system, is providing energy, but it's also collecting, and it always has to preserve itself above the others. So if it's not getting enough of a charge, if it's depleting and giving more than it's receiving, it's gonna have to give less or take more to keep the charge at the green level, right? Otherwise, we shut down the whole thing and it all collapses, right? So any amount of sacrifice would be justified to keep the whole thing going, right? So this is the type of thinking that goes on in a DC, which is disconnected, but it's direct current. It's a one-way current. You're either giving charge to those in it, or you're taking a charge, right? And what usually happens is, you just like a drug dealer, you start by giving them a lot to get them in, and then eventually, as they stay plugged in, you're taking more and more. But it also occurs, it might seem like Rick and Morty, like when they go into the microverse and the teeny-verse and the teeny-weeny-verse, universes within universes that are all nested, you can recreate this technology within each system and keep going further down, and you can generate energy from anyone that you get to come into your time box, right? Into your time matrix. You can harvest that energy from them, and they get to live and work and marry and do their stuff, and yet you get to feed off of their energy. Just like in Rick and Morty, he's got this whole inside the battery is this whole sort of micro universe of creatures in there, and they're jumping on Google boxes, and they're jumping on the Google boxes is powering his spaceship. It's the battery for his spaceship. Now they also get to live, and Morty goes, oh, that sounds like slavery with extra steps. And then they find that there's the microverse also has a teeny verse within it, and they're doing the same thing. So they no longer are jumping on their Google boxes because they are getting energy from below them. And so he has to go down all into these nested universes, these batteries within batteries within batteries, to get them to start jumping on their Google boxes again so that it can power his car, right, or his spaceship. So this is the technology, and there are many layers, and just like these boxes within boxes within boxes, you can have each one of these boxes is generating energy for the box above it. Right? So it's kind of like this. You have this stacking of universes, and it just keeps on going, right? And it goes, well, let's see if I can do this without, right? So if you're in this bottommost box, or let's say in this red box, right? And you're like we are, we're generating a red loosh, which is energy that's created through conflict and through angst and through shame and through guilt and grief and fear of death. Like all this generates energy, and that generation of loosh or energy gets taken up into this battery, and they get to, the guardians of this portal. There's a gate between each one of these, and let's just represent that by this hole, right? See, there's a little hole there, and let's just call that the Stargate. That's the Stargate from this level or this dimension into this dimension, right? And then this dimension has this dimension within it, etc. But each of them has a Stargate that, if you want, you can go from dimension to dimension if you have access to that gate or that portal. But there's gatekeepers, right? And because they don't want people just coming in and out, and they want to keep people in that box, because if they knew there was a higher gate, they might come up here, and there would be no one in the lower gate to be the basis for all of it. And it's sort of a trickle up scenario. It's a trickle up economy. Like the ones at the bottom of the pyramid, right? There's a reason we have this symbol. The ones at the bottom of the pyramid feed energy to the next level, feed energy to the next level, feed energy to the next level. And in a sense, it's captured really well by Lord of the Rings, because whoever has a gate to the uppermost ring, whoever is guarding, who's guarding that gate, because they created the gate, they created the sub-universe, the sub-time box or cube, they have access to that gate, and it's as if they have a ring that makes them invisible, right? Because to anyone below it, like when Rick and Morty go down to the microverse, they all treat them like they're gods, right? And because they came out of this big box in the sky, and they gave us all this technology. They gave us this Google box technology which allows us to generate energy, and it's amazing. So whoever, in this case like Rick, whoever has that ring is invisible to those below them, because they can't be questioned, because they're unquestionable. They come from a higher dimension, right? They're invisible. And so you've got the one ring to rule them all, but to rule them all, you also have, let's say there's nine rings, just like there's 9 planets, right? And each of those 9 planets also has someone in charge of that ring, right? And they are invisible to everyone below them. And so the person who has the guardian, who has the ring to that Stargate, to that hole, they're invisible to everyone below them, but they're also subject to whatever anyone above them says. So they have to pledge allegiance to the one above them, and ultimately to the one ring. So they're given power. They're given a lot of power to be invisible, and you can take energy from any of these lower boxes, because it's like a Ponzi scheme, and each of these different colors of loosh just keep feeding up, and this one takes it, gets ultimately gets as much loosh as it wants, right? But they have to make sure that all of the lower ones continue jumping on their Google boxes, right? Doing their loosh generation, right? Because otherwise the whole thing would collapse. But since it is a closed system, which means it's a direct current, it only, it's give or take. It's not an alternate current. So you got AC energy and DC energy. Alternating current is AC, DC is this direct current, which is like the battery. Because it's not connected to source, it will eventually collapse once it feeds, once it eats up all the energy that can be given. It will eat itself up and it will just collapse. So it has to find a way to keep loosh producers in the system. And so it creates this reincarnation loop, like, oh, you need to go back and accomplish more. And it keeps people in this reincarnation loop so that they don't escape. Because if everyone escaped, if everyone left this Google box, you couldn't generate anymore, and the battery would drain, and it would disintegrate. It would just burst into stardust, and not that it would die, but it wouldn't maintain its form, right? So the two energy systems, let's just repeat there's two energy types, which is like masculine and feminine, or yang and yin, or alpha and omega, or intention and attention. They're just different names for these two basic forms, and it's also sexual and spiritual, right? So we've got these two different forms of energy, and these create energy, and it's collected. Now, the DC energy is what's called biveka, or bivector, like it goes just back and forth, right? And this is where we get the Vesca Pisces, that just has two circles, the positive and the negative, the yang and the yin, the alpha and the omega. But what that's doing is cutting out the secret third, and what we need to achieve is this tri-vector energy system, which is the alternating current, and this third is the neutral source, the neutral true source, right? And it's also represented in the caduceus. So you have the one snake, which is the alpha snake, and another snake, which is the omega snake, the spiritual and the sexual. But you need this third neutral pole, right? This third neutral pole for them to climb up, and then you have this infinite source of 0 point energy, because it keeps coming back to the 0 point, and the pole is the 0 point, the source is the 0 point. So you're not just like expanding and consuming. This is a consumption only, right? If you just keep charging others, or you keep expending or consuming energy, eventually it's going to go to zero sum. But this is 0 point. So the zero sum is where you're always adding or subtracting. And you can look like a magician by taking energy from Peter and giving it to Paul. But this sort of magic is, I'm taking over here, but I'm in order to give over here. But I can't create new energy. If you're cut off from source, you can't create new energy. Now the little creatures in here, the little humanoids, have a little bit of the divine spark in them, and so they can create energy. But the Loosh harvesters are dependent. They've cut themselves off. They've chosen to say, I am God, which is partly true. They are God, but they also have this caveat, I am the only God. There's no other God but me. So it means they can't connect to the source. So that God and only God sort of stance of the DC energy means that they have to harvest from those who still have a divine spark. Okay? So where does that leave us? Like where are we right now? Well, right now, there are many levels. We're just coming out of the Kali Yuga, the Iron Age, the lowest, darkest form. Like we've descended into this, we've dropped into this, and into this, and into this, dropped into this, and we've dropped all the way down into the furthest you can get from source and still be alive, right? And we also have had this great memory loss, right? We go through the river of forgetting, and we forget who we are. We forget that we're divine. We forget all of our past lives, and so it makes it even more difficult to get out. So how can we get out? Well, one way we can get out is to, let's just take one of these, for example. You can climb up. Picture a pyramid within this cube, right? So a pyramid in the cube, and at the very top of that pyramid is this stargate, or the portal, or the entrance into the next higher level. But the difficulty is everyone above you is wanting to keep you below them, and also, even if you get there, there's a guardian who doesn't want to let you through. And so they're going to do everything they can to keep you from getting through. They're going to be blocking that gate, hiding that gate, keeping that a well-kept secret. And even if but let's say you're super enlightened and you go through all the different, learning the different meditations, learning the practices, you go to the mystery schools, you learn from all the mentors and gurus, and you finally, maybe after several lifetimes, you finally find your way through that stargate. But guess what? Even then, that just puts you into another box of, so even at the top of that pyramid, you just get into another box, and they're still harvesting your loosh. And then if you spend another lifetime or two getting to the top of that one, you're just into another one. And let's say you get to the top of that one, you just keep climbing, you keep ascending to higher and higher dimensions, and eventually you get to the 10th dimension. You think this is the highest dimension, and we've been told, like in the tree of life, the Kabbalah tree of life, there's 10 nodes, and the highest one is 10 or maybe 11. But what they don't tell us is that there's a 12th one. They've scrambled our codes so we don't even know that we have this 12th node, this 12th dimension, which is present in our DNA, but it's not activated. Right? We only have these 2 strands activated, and so that's the state of us being stuck. Now, that's quite a very difficult path, right? And so things have just changed. Just as of like April 11th, that we've got these, just like we have these internal stargates, Earth itself has 12 stargates. One of them at Machu Picchu, another one in Tibet, and another one in Lake Titicaca, another one there's a 10th one in Iran, and an 11th one. And these gates have been guarded by, let's say, off-planet sources that are very committed to this disconnected source, this disconnected DC system, right? And so those stargates have been opened up, and the last 2 just recently been opened up, and now all of those are open. And there's also this alignment of timing that we're approaching in just 2 days. On April 17th, we are going to have an alignment of planets such as we've never had in the history of humanity, right? There's several very reliable astrologers that I follow that have all pointed this out to, like, this is a once in a species event on April 17th, and well, this whole year, with like the conjunction in February of Saturn and Neptune in 0 degrees Aries. But this one coming up on April 17th there's a new moon, and the sun is in Aries, the moon is in Aries, Mercury is in Aries, Mars is in Aries, which is fitting that Mars would be in Aries. Saturn is in Aries, Neptune is in Aries, and Chiron is in Aries. Chiron is the planet, the dwarf planet of the wounded healer, right? So we've got a lot of wounded healing that we've been doing, and Chiron is going to be at the table. And Eris, who is the goddess of discord, she's the one that was not invited to the wedding. She was the 13th one, the odd woman out. They didn't want her to come and, you know, disrupt the party, but she tossed an apple in and said, this apple is for the fairest, this golden apple. And of course, you know, the three goddesses, Athena and Aphrodite and Hera, all thought that they were the fairest and that they should get it. And anyway, it led to Paris making a choice, and which led to Helen going with Paris back to Troy, which led to the Trojan War. So in a sense, not inviting Eris led to the entire Trojan War and this whole era of turning away from the gods, because, man, they're really fucked up, because they're like really, you know, they're fighting with each other, and so it's a real turning point. So Eris is going to be there, right? And Salacia as well, which is kind of this deep sea energy, this otherworldly from the water. So we've got these 9 different wanderers, right? 9, some of them planets mean wanderers, so it includes the sun and the moon and some of these dwarf planets as well. But there's 9 of them all in one sign, which is Aries, and Aries is the beginning. We've got a fresh start here. So in a sense, what we have is we have this alignment. Now, if you see each of these different dimensions as like planets represented by the 9 planets, when really there's 12, but each of these is represented each one of these is like one of the 9 Nazgul from Lord of the Rings, and each of them has a ring, and if you're going to escape, you have to go through all these planets to get back to source. But there's a rare event, and this is making for a unique opportunity, which is all of these, instead of these being, you know, picture all of these like being these 2 might be in sync, or these 3 in a rare moment might be in synchronization, or you may have 3 of them together, but to have 9 of them together, right? To have all 9 of them and in Aries, it's called a mega stellium, right? It's never going to happen again in our lifetime, but like not in humanity, right? And so it looks like this, right? This is what this alignment looks like. And so I invite us to prepare ourselves for this great escape, because we're going to be able to escape not just this one box here, right? But we're going to be able to escape multiple boxes, right? We'll be able to step out of these false frameworks, these disconnected DC. Interesting that Washington is Washington, DC. Like we send all our taxes to DC, to the battery, and then the battery decides who gets the charges, right? Who gets to be charged. Like, oh, well, let's give it. And then they're just giving us back. But then, yeah, Washington, DC. I digress. But here, what we have on the 17th is this rare alignment. Okay, and so Jesus told me, I'm not the answer, I am the question, right? And as we talked about before, the question is what's going to set us free. Asking the right question. Even Einstein said, if I had 60 minutes to solve a problem, I would spend 55 of those 60 minutes trying to find the right question. And then the answer is just obvious. Right? But finding the right question, that's the sticky wicket. And so, Jesus also said, seek and you shall find. Knock and the door will be opened unto you. Ask and it shall be given to you. Well, I've spent my whole life seeking Christ's answers and knocking on the door. And, sometimes he even, as he promised, opens the door. And then he says, ask and you shall receive. And so I've been asking, what are the questions? What are the questions I need to ask? What are the questions? What's the most important question? Just like, Douglas Adams in Hitchhiker's Guide to the Universe, everyone's seeking for the ultimate answer to life and the universe and everything, but they got the answer 42 after 7.5 million years, right? And it was like 42, and said, well, maybe you should have asked a different question. And so they created Earth as a big computer to figure out what is the ultimate question, right? And it spent 10 million years working on finding what the ultimate question is. And right before they're about to come up with the question, the Vogons wiped out Earth. So, but one guy escaped and the answer was in his head, and he was able to kind of get it out unconsciously through drawing Scrabble tiles, and he found out what the most important question is. And so I'm going to share with you what I think are the 5 questions that anyone in any place can ask that will help you figure out where you are and how to escape. So we can, whether you're in the blue box or the green box or the purple box or the orange box or the red box or whichever box you might be in, Loosh-harvesting box you may be stuck in, there are 5 diagnosis questions to both diagnose where you are, and then a final 5th question to help you, once you get out of this, to figure out how to connect. So I'm going to be sharing that on Friday, April 17th at 3:33 p.m. Pacific time, and I'll put a link below, and I invite you to join me live as I share these 5 questions. And it's going to be, this time is an exciting time to be alive, and we're going to be entering into a great festival, great feast, a graduation party or a wedding feast, and you might be surprised at who's there, right? There might be even some people that maybe you would have thought wouldn't be invited or that wouldn't come. But I'm going to invite us to enter into this state with a spirit of curiosity, because that's, if there was one thing Jesus said, well, there's 2 things that he said most frequently. One is, don't judge, because as you judge, so shall you be judged. If you're in a judging economy, you're going to be locked in that Loosh economy, that Loosh-harvesting economy. But he also said the kingdom of heaven is within you. And so the source is within us. And if we can stop looking anywhere outside of us, he said, when I return, don't go looking out. Don't go looking up to the sky. Don't go looking out in the desert. Don't go looking into the inner rooms. He says it will be obvious, right? And he's coming not to teach us what is the answer. He's coming to teach us how to think in a way that is multidimensional, that is connected to source, that's eternal, that gives eternal life, not immortal life. Immortal life is life forever stuck in one of these boxes. And believe me, we don't want immortal life. We want eternal life, which is eternally being able to move in and out of time, being able to move up and down through any different density or dimension. And that's our path to true paradise. Hell is just getting stuck in any one. So I invite you to join me, and we'll look at these 5 questions that will help us together and individually escape this escape room and see it as a puzzle, see it as a game, see it as a challenge, see it as a school that we're graduating from, see it as a final exam that we have to gather together in groups to solve. And there's not one answer, but there's many different answers depending on where we are and who we're with and who we are and where we are. So I gotta tell you, this is the big event. This is the big event, leading up to this for, 500 billion years. And here we are. So it's an exciting time to be alive. We'll see you on, if you'd like to join, Friday, April 17th, 3:33 p.m. And let's go forth with curiosity and with love and connecting to our source.